Man, I'm so excited. So welcome, both online as well as in person. We're here for our Give Serve Sunday. And if this is your first time experiencing Give Love Serve, it's not like a typical Sunday because it's all about giving back to our community. It's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about what can I get out of this. This is an event, not an event to make our church bigger. It's not an event to make our lives more comfortable or make our lives easier. This event is perhaps the most unselfish thing that we can do as a church together. And I'm excited about it because of the impact, because of the difference that we make. This event invites you to be part of something big. There are thousands of churches all over America, all over the world, in fact, that choose to take this time of the year right now to do Give, Serve, Love in an effort to kick off a year of involvement in our community. For too long has the church been a building located on its property that says, well, if you want to find out what our church is about, you have to come inside to find out. It's time for us to bust the walls open and get out in the community and be a part of the community. Like yesterday. Yesterday was incredible. We were at the Trunk or Treat event in Birch Run, and we had a record turnout. Over 1,200 kids received invitations to our movie night happening this next Friday. Want to make sure you come to that. You should have saw the kids' faces. They're like, the bad guys. Oh my gosh, I love that movie. Or I want to see that movie. So excited to come to see that. And of course, we handed out candy. We handed out stickers. And it was just an incredible day. I'm so excited. It was a win for our church because thousands of people in the community were impacted by something we did to give away from ourselves. And that's one small example of what serving, what giving, what loving looks like when we go out in the community, become a part of what they're doing out there. And I know we all want to make a difference. I mean, you're like me, you don't wake up each day thinking, well, another day to wake up, go to work, punch in the clock, punch out, eat, sleep, wake up tomorrow, and then I'll do this a few 100,000 times and I die. That's not what we want life to be about. We want our life to matter for something. We want for there to be a day where people say, man, I'm so glad you made a difference in my life. Thank you for what you did in my life. And this is our chance to be a part of that out of the ordinary. Because together, we could do much more than we could ever do alone. So it's why you're here right now. It's why you're listening online. You could be doing anything online right now, but you chose to tune in and listen to this. You could be anywhere right now. It's a Sunday morning. I mean, hey, but you're here, and I thank you because this is our chance to come together corporately and do something incredible together. So we started Give, Serve, Love at this church in 2020. It's been happening much longer than that, but in 2020, we started doing this as a church, and I apologize, since 2019. And since then, we have given over $11,000 away. As a small startup church that we've been, we have given more than $11,000 away in the community because 100% of the funds that we take as donations for this event, 100% goes out in the community. We don't use any of it, no administrative fees, no whatever. It goes out in the community to put in action, to help kick in organizations like Saginaw Rescue Mission, like Foster Closet, to help them to do more. We enable them to do more, and they're so thankful for our partnership and the part that we play. Our generosity has caught the attention of the community, and I'm sure this year, especially more than ever, but we get to do more. And today, I'm going to explain more about that as we get going throughout the day. You're going to hear me talk a little bit. We've got a lot of videos to look at together to explain what's going on. But if you want to stay with me right now, we will take the next part of service to have our music and our worship portion with Woodstock City Church.
Nothing like Jesus. Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. This morning we stand in awe of who you are, God. Help us to respond to your majesty and your kindness and your grace in an appropriate way. And I think that way is just to say thank you. So this morning we just stop and say thank you for who you are. Help us to be in awe. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for singing with us. Y'all can have a seat.
2007, the year Apple announced the iPhone, and Bob Barker announced his retirement. Peyton Manning won his first Super Bowl, and Jordan Sparks was crowned American Idol. Gas peaked at $2.80 a gallon, and movies could be seen for only $6.88. And in 2007, a movement began in our church. A movement that started small and spread across the world. A movement that unleashed a wave of generosity and shared hope with everyone in its wake. And that same movement continues today with each one of us. Together, we can do more good than we can on our own. Together, we can continue to give, serve, and love our community. Together.
Together. It feels good to be together, right? It feels good to be together. This is good. I have strong convictions about the way Jesus Christ instructs followers to live their lives. And when you come to church here for a little while, it's no secret. You figure that out pretty quick. So much so that I've made a lot of changes to my life because of these convictions. For example, the decision to give up my career as a journeyman electrician. I was making a comfortable union salary. I had the best Blue Cross Blue Shield healthcare you can have. I had 2 retirement pension funds. Really, I kind of had the tiger by the tail as far as, at a young, I think I was 26 years old, and I just, making it happen in life. I thought, this is fantastic. And then something happened where I came across a person that caused me to question a lot of things that I thought were normal about being a Christian. I came across a missionary, and his life was so filled with conviction. Like, he didn't just talk about how much time you should spend serving, or he didn't just talk about how much of yourself you should give. Like, he gave it all. He was all in 100%. And he was a person that I looked at him and I thought, okay, wow, how do you do that? And so I began to study him and began to listen to what he was saying closer, and it challenged me, and it caused me to be inspired and to be willing to give up my career and move my family to the other side of the world to become missionaries, to join him in what he was doing. It so moved me not only what he was saying, but it was the life he was living. In other words, it was more than just words. And that caused me to do that. And then I was involved in ministry from there. From a missionary, I was a full-time pastor working in churches, different ministries, and worked through 3 different churches throughout the span of my time as a minister. But over that time, I keep studying and keep digging deeper and deeper into God's word, into the life that Jesus lived, not just the words Jesus said. I look deeper and deeper into the early church. I'm a huge history buff. I love studying the early church, the first church that became because of Jesus telling his 12, okay, go do this now. Those disciples started something, and look what it's become today because of it. And so that fascinates me. So I was thinking, what were the secrets? What was it about them meeting that worked so amazing? And why don't we see that as much today? If 12 people can spread the world that much, then how many millions of Christians are there right now? Why in the world isn't the whole world converted? These kinds of thoughts strike my mind. I'm like, what's going on? So I'm digging deeper, and I'm starting to find disconnects between the way that most of us Christians live our lives and the way Jesus said to live our life, that they aren't always aligned perfectly. And it's not anybody's fault necessarily. A lot of times it's just because we didn't know. A lot of times it's because even as teachers and preachers preaching the word, we missed things, or we weren't fully explaining enough of things. And consequently, there's times that even as preachers, we're not living the life that we should live fully as Christ, as Jesus instructed us to do. And so as I began saying that, I became challenged, and I said, I feel like something needs to be done, And so God challenged me to give up again a very comfortable salary and a very comfortable career that I had as an assistant pastor to begin a new church. And that's how we have Silver Creek Church today. And there's 3 words that come up over and over and over again that Jesus said. They're woven throughout his messages, and those are give, serve, and love. And too often the church is just a building. Too often the church is just a place where people come and they attend a church, right? And in general, it's a nice thing. People have good things experienced at churches, and it changes people's lives. But again, those questions come to my mind about, well, why isn't the world changed more? And church can be predictable. And even when you attend church, your life can become predictable. But then you think about home. And home is different. Home is a place where the people that I live with affect my life in a great way. The people you live with, you become more like each other the more time you spend around each other. Like it or not. Sometimes we like that, sometimes we don't, but that's what happens. We become more like each other because we do life together. We impact each other, we affect each other. And I think church is supposed to be a little bit more like a home than a church. And that's why you hear us say all the time, welcome home. Because we believe that's important, that we have relationships with each other and that there's genuine life done together. Not just talked about, but really truly there for each other when we need each other and so on. So this change that we want to become more like Jesus, well, let's study these 3 words. First of all, this is about give, serve, love. And so this week we're talking about it. Give is the first word. And give, it's about we give money to help others. As a church, we receive an offering. Now, it's not that we just do it once and then we're good for the year. It's like, okay, cool. No, this is just our kickoff. This is like, the homecoming. This is let's launch the season. It's going to be a great season. We're going to get it kicked off with a bang. And so we begin this time of year, but our intention is to continue, and we do all year long. But giving to others can be easy if it's somebody who you really like. It's easy, like to give to your girlfriend or your new wife, or it's like, oh yeah, I love you, here's a gift. But when it's people we don't like, or people we don't agree with, or people we don't even know, it can be a little more difficult. There's more of a disconnect. The next one is serve. And serving is about giving of our time. We give of our time to help other people. And there's people who don't have as much as we have. And the intention is that we should give some of our time to those people who need help. I mean, there's people out there who could use the talents or the giftings that you have as an individual. And there's places like the rescue missions where they just frankly need help. Then of course there's love, and love is the most difficult of all of them because love is not just a word, it's an action. We put words into action, and when you show love, love is shown through giving and serving to others. It's an intentional act to benefit someone else, someone other than myself. Love is really when I do something that's not, I'm not in it for me, but it's something selfless to help someone else. Now, one of my responsibilities as a pastor is to decide what we're going to talk about every single Sunday of the year. And if it seems overwhelming, it is. I mean, think about it. It's like, I gotta have this figured out for the whole year. That can be tough sometimes. But what I do is I seek God's face through prayer. And over time, I grow comfortable with understanding his voice a little bit better and better and his guidance to know what to do for an individual Sunday. But my goal, my intention is to pick topics and to flow with the Holy Spirit with the idea that we all go on a journey in our faith. In other words, everything builds on each other. That after coming for 6 months, you can almost see a journey happen in your life of becoming closer and closer to Christ. That's the goal. And for today, I came across an interview that I felt like was perfect and appropriate for today. Because there's times that I'll share things myself, and there's times I'll let someone else share it because I feel like it's a good thing, and I'm secure that way. I don't have an insecurity about letting someone else share. When it comes, I feel like they do a better job. Jeff Foxworthy, if you know who Jeff Foxworthy is, he's a funny comedian. Remember, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? He kind of hosted that show. He's known for doing a lot of comedy albums. What is it? The Blue Collar, right? The tour, whatever they travel around. He and a bunch of guys. He's a very funny guy. Well, believe it or not, you may not know this about him, but he attends a church that participates in Give, Serve, Love every year. And he's been impacted by that. And in a minute, I'm going to let us watch an interview where our Uncle Andy is going to interview Jeff Foxworthy, who attends that church. And they're going to talk about something that happened. But when they're talking, I want to explain something. At their church, and this is North Point in Alpharetta, Georgia, they use a term called Be Rich. So not only is it Give, Serve, Love, but they also have a tagline, Be Rich. And let me explain where that comes from. That comes from 1 Timothy chapter 6. It's not a prosperity message, so don't worry. It comes from 1 Timothy chapter 6. It refers to two facts that Paul is sharing with Timothy in this verse. The first fact is that, especially in this time of history when Paul's writing to Timothy, that if you had more than enough, like in other words, if you had enough to survive, you were common. And if you had less than survive, you were called poor. If you had a little bit more than you needed to survive, you were called rich. And so it's a little bit different than today. Today we might put terms in our idea of rich as, millions, like a millionaire. We might, that's a rich person. Or, they have a salary of over $500,000 a year. That's a rich person. We might have our terms of that. But in biblical times, and really frankly, it's the same today, because when you look at the world as a whole, like in other words, all the population, people who have more than enough to get by are rich. I mean, if you have a choice of, we can eat whatever we want to, what do you want to eat? If we have a choice of, we could go out to eat or we can eat at home, we're rich. We have more than enough. And so the idea is this, is that if you're rich, well, then you should behave as a responsible rich person and be generous and give some of your extra to help others who don't have enough or who don't have as much. And so you can replace the term be rich with be generous. Or you can replace be rich with give as if you had more than enough. Give as if you were rich. And so that's where that term comes from. I wanted to explain that. So with no further ado, let's dive in. We're going to check out this interview with Jeff Foxworthy, and I'll be back up in a few minutes to talk to you some more.
Please welcome to the stage, my friend and yours, one of the funniest men in America, Jeff Foxworthy.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. Wow. So thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jeff and I have known each other a long time. I'm not sure how we met or who introduced us, but I think it was 2008. Jeff and I actually went to Africa on a Compassion International trip to meet the kids we sponsored. And so I'm not going to show any pictures of me, but here Jeff is doing, he didn't know, yet another talent that people didn't know.
The only job I'm really qualified for, blowing bubbles.
So we had a fantastic time in that environment, and spending that much time together with Jeff, realized this is a guy that's way more than what people see on television. We became friends. People know you as famous comedian, blue collar comedy. That's for some people, that was their introduction to you. Then Fifth Grader, an incredible run. That was so much fun.
As long as they give me the card with the answers.
As long as they give you the card with the answer. 20-something books. How many books?
I don't know, 26, 7, something
yeah,
like that.
People don't even know that a lot of people don't know that you're an author. Yeah, 26, 27 books. And the most amazing thing, I want to get this right, you've done 6 comedy albums. 3 of them went triple platinum, which means each one sold about 3 million. So Jeff is the largest selling comedy recording artist in the history of the world. So that's like amazing, yeah.
It just seems like it should be somebody else.
Yeah. So maybe something folks don't know about you is you actually grew up in Atlanta, so tell us a little bit about that. You actually grew up in
Hapeville, literally at the end of the runway when, that's maybe the way I am because I've inhaled so many jet fumes in my life. But it was, the home of Chick-fil-A, so I've known the Cathy families when that was the only Chick-fil-A in the world. So
wow.
It was a cool place.
Dwarf House.
The Dwarf House, the original.
And grew up in Southern Baptist, going to church?
Southern Baptist Church, got saved early in life, 7 years old. I remember that Sunday, I was like, I wanted to go down, and my mother was holding my shirt.
Like during the invitation?
Yeah, during the invitation, the old "Just As I Am," the choir's gonna sing 5 stanzas, and I'm like, I want to go down. And my mom was like, you're too little. You don't know what you're doing. So, and I don't know how this worked out. The preacher came to our house. They had the preacher do a house call, and it sat down and talked to me. And he told my mom, yeah, he knows what he's doing. And so I'm like, we're going the Sunday night service, you know.
Yep.
I said, we're going Sunday night because I'm not going to hell because y'all were too lazy, you know, to let me get in, you know. So
But you want to get in for something.
want to be in
happened.
the club, yeah, in case the world ends tomorrow.
So it was one of those Southern Baptist churches. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was, which was a little bit of a problem for me because anybody that kind of grew up in that strict church environment, it was kind of one of those places where, you know, don't drink, don't smoke, don't cuss, walk, you know, like do this. And I knew at a very early age I was wired like this. So it was a little bit of a dichotomy for me because I'm like, I know I love God, but I can't do that. You know, that will drive me crazy. And it probably wasn't until adulthood that I reached the fact that it was like God went, wait a minute, I formed you in your mother's womb. I made you like this because you can have influence on people that can't do this.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, that was just freeing.
Well, you just freed up a whole bunch of people.
Oh, I love people like this, you know. It's like,
So your faith started at a young age, and as like everybody else, there were twists and turns along the way. But that's just been a big part of your life and a central part of your life the whole time, for the most part.
yeah, it always was. You know, it's like weird with comedy because I will have people say, well, why don't you just do Christian comedy? And I'm like, well, then the only people that listen to me are Christians. Why can't I be a comedian that loves, you know, and the cool thing about that is I'm a big outdoors guy. I love to hunt and fish and hike and all that stuff. So people will come hear me like at a wild game dinner that would never go to church.
Yep.
But they'll come to laugh for 30 minutes and then maybe, you know, I can share something else with them.
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't regret that.
So let's talk about the comedy thing a little bit. So you went to Georgia Tech.
Went to Georgia Tech. I was a Georgia fan. I would have gone to Georgia. I had no money. And so I had to live at home, and I worked at a grocery store full time. So Tech was the closest school, and I went there for 3 years until they invited me to take some time off. Yeah, here's the funny part. So I had 3 years
to
at
make many
Tech.
of us feel better.
Yeah.
This.
And so last Christmas, my mother was saying to me, you know, you have 3 years. You just should go back and get that last year. And I said, Mom, the comedy thing is working out okay. And, she's like, I know, but you would have something to fall back on. So I went and then I took some time off. And
you went to work for?
Went to work for IBM. Started in dispatch, but I had a job carrying a tool bag, fixing machines. It sounds more glamorous than it was. And I was the guy that was always like doing impersonations of the boss in the break room. And then somebody would tap you and you turn around and the boss would be, you know. So I was not headed for greatness there.
At IBM. But actually, it was your friends at IBM that encouraged you to step
Well, I had a
into-
bunch of friends that would go to the Punchline every week. You know, it was kind of new, the comedy club thing. And they kept coming back to work and going, Fox, you're funnier than the people down there. You ought to go do this. And I didn't. And so they entered me in a contest. A lot of people probably remember it, the Great Southeastern Laugh-Off. They entered me in this.
They signed you up.
They signed me up. And this wasn't an amateur night. It was for working comedians. And so I'm like, I went and watched for a week to try to get an idea what it was all about.
So you've never been to a comedy club?
No. Well, when I was a kid, I would buy like, you know, Cosby albums and Bob Newhart and Flip Wilson, and I'd memorize them and go to school and get in trouble for them. The best note that I ever got in my life, first time I played the Fox Theater, somebody brought a note to the dressing room, and it was from my high school principal. And he said, I cannot believe I am shelling out money to listen to the same kind of stuff I used to try to put a stop to. So,
It's this thing.
yeah, there's that guy again.
Yeah.
So I went home and wrote 5 minutes about my family and went back the next week and won the contest.
Wow.
And first time on set, I had no idea what I was doing.
Now, something else very significant happened that night.
Yes, my wife,
Current wife.
no,
she wasn't your
only,
wife
well,
then.
yeah, no, she wasn't my wife then.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
I was single.
Yeah.
Well, current,
I'm
you
just
know, it
trying-
sounds like the one he's
Well,
got
wait till we
now,
find
not one
out.
of the next 2 or 3. So, but she was an actress, and she had just done a movie with a guy that was a comic. And so they had a group that came down to root for this guy.
So
And
he was in the...
He was in the contest. We're still friends today. So I met, and she came up and talked to me. And I was so nervous. I looked at her and I spilled my drink right all down the front of her. And I'm like, well, I guess you'll never go out with me. And she said, you haven't even asked. And that was 30 years ago. So we've been married 32 years. I met my wife and my career the same night, same place. So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and she encouraged you to chase this
She
dream?
was the only person, you know, and I guess it was because she was the one saying, you've got all this creative stuff inside of you. You're going to go crazy if you don't get it out. So after 2 or 3 months of doing amateur nights, I quit IBM.
And-
this was my mother's first question. Are you on the dope? Not just dope, the dope. Are you on the dope? And I'm like, no, I'm not on dope. I want to try to be a comedian. And she's like, we can get you help. We have, you know. 5 years later, I was on Johnny Carson. The same mother's going, you know, you wasted all those years at IBM. And I'm like, whatever.
Moms. They're the best. Okay, so you met Greg, your wife.
Yeah,
And you've been married for 30, what?
30 years. And immediately, 32 years.
We got a picture of your whole family. Check this
Do we?
out. Look at, yeah, there they
Yeah,
are.
that's my
Yeah.
girls, all girls, yeah. My oldest daughter, Jordan, who works at the Atlanta Mission full-time, that's her job. Jules, a Auburn grad. Oh, really?
Too
We're gonna
soon.
do that on Sunday. We're just gonna rub it in.
Too soon.
And then my beautiful wife, who doesn't change, and I just get old, so.
That's fabulous. So, the comedy thing, your mom was right. It ultimately worked out. The other thing, before we switch gears, that I love about you, Jeff, and I've heard this from other people, and then I've asked you about it, is during all those years, being a professional comedian, you're all over the country, you're on the West Coast a lot, you live in Georgia, you stayed here, and where it would have been so easy to just disconnect from family and just live that life. You paid a price, both in terms of time, energy, and money, to get home, be there in the morning, get your kids to school, and that's always been a priority for you.
Yeah, well, my dad left when I was young, and so, and no matter what your parents say, when you're a kid and your parent leaves, in your mind, you think I wasn't worth sticking around for. That's what you feel. And so, even though I had a job that put me in a different city every night, I would rent a plane. I would fly out of PDK. I would fly home every night. So, say Friday night I had a show in St. Louis, I would go do the show, and I would fly home and get home at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd get up and I'd take them to soccer or basketball or whatever they were doing. And then I'd get back on the plane at 4 in the afternoon, fly to Minneapolis or fly to, wherever I was doing. But I would take my kids to school every day. And my brother lives next door to me. I'd take 5 little girls to school every day because I wanted my kids to know, hey, even though I love what I do, you're the priority in my life.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing for folks to know because it's so easy to use a myriad of things as an excuse, but that was that cost you in terms of time, influence, and a whole lot of sleep,
Yeah.
and a whole lot of money. So, 10 years ago, and this is amazing. 10 years ago, someone that I don't think you even knew all that well invited you to do something you had no interest in at all. So, tell us about how the whole involvement with the mission
I did
got
a country
started.
countdown show for 10 years. Recorded it on Tuesday morning, and it would air on the weekend. And so it got canceled, and I kept thinking, well, what am I going to do on Tuesdays? And I was with my girls at the Carter Center watching a documentary thing, and then they had to go to the bathroom, and whatever you girls do in the bathroom takes a lot longer than whatever us guys in the bathroom do. So I'm killing time, and the guy had a table set up from the Atlanta mission. And I took one of their brochures, and as I'm reading it, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was a faith-based thing. And the guy's name was Joshua Harrelson, and he said, hey, if you want to have lunch, he wrote his number down. And I got home, I put it on the kitchen counter, and for months, I mean 2 or 3 months, my wife would be, can I throw this away? I'm like, nah, don't throw that away yet. But it just sat there. Things came and went. And I finally called him, and he said, yeah, come down for lunch. And in my mind, I'm thinking, he wants something out of me. He wants me to do a show and donate the money, or he wants me to do their commercials. He wants something. And I asked him, I'm like, what do you want? He said, I just want to have lunch. And so he invited me down. The first guy that I met at the mission, and this was my feeling about people that were homeless. I'm like, oh, there's somebody homeless, find a few bucks, and they'll go away. And I can go deal with what I'm dealing with. The first guy I met was now we're in the middle of downtown Atlanta. It's this white 20-year-old.
This is your first trip down?
First trip down there, having lunch down in the cafeteria. 21-year-old kid named Jason. And I'm looking at him, and to be honest, I'm like, get a job. You lazy, what the heck are you? You're 21 years old. What are you doing? And so we sit down, and Joshua says, hey, Jason, tell him your story. And Jason said, well, it was me and my brother and my mom and dad. And then when I was 11, my mom killed herself. He said, and then the next year, my brother killed himself. And then it was just me and my dad. And my second year of college, my dad killed himself. He said, and I just got tired of hurting. And so I just started getting high. And I'm looking at this kid, and I'm thinking, I would have got high too. Oh, because when you get high or when you get drunk, you're not a good employee, so you don't work. Nobody wants to hire you, and so you don't have money, and so you start borrowing and taking from people around you, and that's how you end up on the street. It's some kind of hurt that you numb to. That's how you end up on the street. That's how you end up homeless. Something bad happened to you and you couldn't get past. So all of a sudden, instead of being nameless and faceless, this was a real guy with a real story that really, the story stung. And I'm looking at him and I'm going, I could be homeless. I could be you, because I would have gotten high too. And
so what was the ask? After lunch, I mean, there was an ask.
Well, I went back 2 or 3 times, and I kept thinking, what do you want? And I kept asking Joshua, what do you want? And he said, finally, he said, you keep asking what do I want, I'll tell you what I want. I want you to lead a small group. He said, none of these guys have ever done a small group.
A small group at the Atlanta mission with homeless people.
Yeah, do a little small group Bible study. And I'm thinking, there's 6.5 million people in Atlanta, and you can't find anybody more qualified than me? Really? And so that's how it began. It was me and 12 guys. And I had to even entice them. I would stop at Chick-fil-A and get chicken biscuits. I'm like, if you'll just come to small group, I'll give you a chicken biscuit. And
so literally, when you get to Chick-fil-A on Tuesday mornings, they're not even open
I'll wait
yet.
for them to open. I'm standing outside in the dark with my little
So if you would ever like to
cooler.
get Jeff's autograph, if you'll go to the Chick-fil-A, you have to get there at 6:15,
Yeah, you
right?
got 6:15, you got a good shot at it, yeah.
So you pick up okay, keep going,
And
sorry.
so, and what was weird, it was almost divine. And I'm like, wow, this job is bigger than I am. So I had a group of guys that some of them I barely knew, that I would text and go, hey, you want to come down here? And one like my closest
Some of your friends, yeah.
Yeah, just an associate. And somebody say, oh, this guy's kind of got a heart for, and I'm like, would you like to come down? And almost to a man, every one of them said, I'll come down once, but Tuesdays are busy for me. I can't do it but once. And then 10 years later, they've been there every Tuesday for a decade.
Wow.
I love these guys. These guys are just so all in. I know some of them are out here today. And so it's not my thing. All I did was say yes. That's all I did. I wasn't qualified. I just said, yes, I'll do this.
Now, why'd you go back?
You know what? Well, the thing with Jason...
Because he didn't ask you initially to do anything. It was just...
Well, here's why I went back was because of the stories. And in fact, one of my best friends, oh my gosh, if you've never read a book called Same Kind of Different as Me, Ron Hall and Denver Moore, the story of them, but that book really influenced me. And one of my dearest friends in the whole world, Wayne Cook, he and I are that book, but I was scared to death of Cook because Cook's big and he was angry when I first started going in there. And I have a friend, Ronnie Brassfield, we call him Chicken Man. And so in one of those early groups, it was hard to get them to talk, to discuss, because if you'd been in church, you don't talk. And so I was trying to think of questions. So one of my questions was, what is the Bible? And so Chicken Man, one guy said, well, it's just a book. So Chicken Man took the trash can, put it in the middle of the floor, and walked over and dropped his Bible in the trash can. And you see everybody go.
Yeah.
And Cook got up and he pulled it out and he wiped it off. He said, Chicken Man, don't do that. And he said, well, if it's just a book, why does that bother you? And Cook told this story, the condensed version. He said, when his mom died, he said, I inherited $70,000. And like a lot of us, when we have excess, we don't do well with it. And he just started partying, got a couple of girlfriends, and they're partying night and day, quit going to work, you know, getting high, doing crack. And when you don't go to work, you don't get paid. When you don't get paid, you don't pay your rent and you end up on the street. And he said, so when I get kicked out of my apartment, we're bouncing from place to place, and I've got my stuff in a few suitcases in a backpack, but as I'm bouncing from place to place, I'm losing stuff. And one of the things that he had was when he was a kid, he had this Bible that his mother had given him, and on the inside cover, she had written a love letter to him on the inside cover of the Bible. Well, somewhere along the way, he loses this Bible. Then, as always happens, the money runs out. The next day, the girlfriends go away, and now you've got a crack habit and you're on the street. Year and a half later, a guy hires him and another guy to go clean out an apartment building that he had bought, and he's going to refurbish and rent out. And so 2 floors, they're cleaning them out. Cook's on the bottom floor, another guy's on the second floor. And Cook goes up to check on him, and he said, there's a little pile of stuff in the corner. Now, this is 100 miles from Atlanta. Year and a half later, 100 miles from Atlanta. He's going, and he said, what's that stuff in the corner? He said, well, that's stuff I found that might be worth something. Cook said he's over there rooting through it, looking at it, and there's a little pile of books covered in dirt. And he reaches down and he pulls a book out of the pile, and he opens it up, and there's the love letter from his mother.
It's his Bible.
It's his Bible. Year and a half later, 100 miles away. If you put it in a movie, people would say that's not believable. And he said he literally collapsed to the floor and started sobbing. And he's like, okay, if God's chasing me this hard,
Wow.
I'm going to quit running. Wayne Cook has been sober for a decade and has taken more guys off the street down at the Atlanta Mission than anybody in Atlanta.
Wow.
So,
Jeff, you told me that when you start a new group or there's new guys coming into the group, you oftentimes start with Luke 15, and you start with the story of the prodigal son, and you know the setting is Jesus has Pharisees and religious leaders on one side and tax collectors and sinners on the other, and neither of them understand what God is like, and so he tells these 3 little parables, these 3 little stories, the third one being the story of the prodigal son. But there's also an older brother, and so you told me that's in terms of introducing them to the gospel and the significance of what's about to happen. That's where you start. Why that story, and what's the connection between that and that group?
I think it's the greatest piece of literature ever written. And it's, you know, you open your Bible and it's this big. But it's, you know, the story of one son that says, hey, I want my inheritance, which in that culture meant, I wish you were dead.
Yeah.
You're not dying fast enough. So it says to your dad, I wish you were dead. I want my money. And, you know, goes out and squanders it on all the things that the world tells you are cool things, women and booze and whatever. And you know, ends up feeding somebody's pigs and wishing he could eat what they were eating. He's like, all right, I'll swallow my pride and go back home to dad. And that part of the story that I love is it says, while he was still a long ways away, his father saw him. So his father wasn't, that's an active thing. That's not a passive thing. He's searching the hilltops, waiting on this kid that said, I wish you were dead. You know, they reunite, puts on the ring, the robe, and the sandals, meaning You're not a servant, you're family. And the son that had stayed and that had done everything right gets mad because, you know, the father had said, let's kill the fatted calf and have a celebration because my son that was dead is now alive. You know who hated to see the son come home the most?
I would guess the brother, but
No, the fatted calf.
oh, yeah. I should
The
not have
calf's
answered
like,
that out
oh
loud.
no, it's. You're going to use that down the road, though, I guarantee you.
No, I'm just not going to answer that question next service. Yeah.
Come on. So, but I think it's just such a great analogy because it's called the prodigal son, but it's not really about the son that went away. It's not even about the son that stays and gets mad because they're having a party. It's about the love of the Father. I mean, the whole story's about that, and that's who God is. You can't be bad enough to make him quit loving you, and you can't be good enough to make him love you more. And I think sometimes, especially within the organized church, we become that son that stayed, and we're like, I'm going to do everything right, and you'll love me more. And he's like, no, it's not possible. I don't love you any more than I love the guy that's smoking crack under the bridge. I love you all the same. And that's what makes him so cool, man, is we don't love that way. He loves that way.
Did the guys resist that story? Is that kind of an eye-opening moment?
Well,
or
I
does it take
think-
a while for that to settle?
You know, most people that live in addiction got damaged early on some type of abuse. It might have been sexual abuse, or physical abuse, emotional abuse. So it's hard, you know, to feel like you're loved that way. And I think for a lot of people, the idea of father's not necessarily a good word to a lot of people. You know, especially when you've had a father that's left you or abused you or whatever. So there's a transition there. But this is why these Bible studies are important, because once, and what I did is everything my earthly father could not give me, it was like, God's like, okay, you want a daddy that just loves you, a daddy that doesn't leave, a daddy that's here, a daddy that encourages you, that and so I just let God be my daddy. You know, and there were nights days to this day when I get frustrated and I'm like, Dad, can I just climb up in your lap and you rub my head for a little bit? And so, you know, I freed my dad, because my dad's dad left early. My dad's dad went out for a pack of cigarettes and never came back. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's why my dad was that way. So I freed my dad up from that, and I loved my dad. He passed away in 1999, but he's freed up from that. And so once you understand, oh, I am loved, and I'm not, you know, because that's what we all have in common. As a comedian, all I'm thinking about is, what do we have in common? That's what I look for comedy in. Well, one thing we all have in common, everybody wants to be significant. Everybody wants to be worth something. And at the cross, God said, you're not worth something, you're worth everything. You're worth everything to me. I'm going to give up my perfect son for you. If you were the only person on the planet, I'm going to do this for you. I love you this much. And so in addiction, if you can ever get that hurt to heal, you can get restored. And it doesn't happen in every case, but it happens over and over and over again down there. Guys that were the hopeless heroin addicts that are out there making a difference, you know, got their own place, got marriages. And so we're all damaged. Every one of us is jacked up in some way. And I think the thing that just thrills God's heart is to see broken things restored.
Wow.
Because God doesn't start something and go, oh, that didn't work out, I'm going to give up on that. He's like, no, if you'll trust me, I'll make this right.
You told me a story once where, because, you know, they're homeless and they all have a story, but they get accustomed to people doing things for them. They come to the mission and they're fed, they come to the mission, they can get into a program. So you decided you were gonna try to teach them, this particular group you'd been with for a while, you had good relationships, to be generous. So you decided you're gonna give them some money to, can you tell that story? Is that too awkward?
No, it's not too hard. So, but how many people have been wrong about something? Okay, I've been wrong about, it's funny when I look back at my life, most of the things that I argued vehemently for or against 30 years ago, I've totally changed my mind. So the mission has a wonderful thing. It's called being in the program, and if you agree to get clean, if you'll get sober, they'll put you up for a year. They'll feed you every day. They'll put you up for a year, but we're going to go through, emotional healing, spiritual healing, job attainment, all kinds of
They
things.
have to be in a small group with Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah, well, but it's like we want to restore. We don't want to just keep taking care of you because you're homeless. We want you not to be homeless. And so after about a year of doing the program, Jim Reese, who quit his job as CEO of a Fortune 100 company to run the Atlanta mission, just an amazing story in itself. I said to Jim, Jim, they need to bless somebody because we're providing every meal, we're providing the beds, we're providing the towels and the soap. They need to bless somebody. And I said, I want to give them all at Christmas $100. And Jim's like, oh no, I don't want people on the street buying crack. No, don't give them $100. And so, and I just, I kept praying over this and I said, I'm telling you, it's going to be okay. I just feel like God's telling me it's going to be okay. So we ended up on $50. And so by this time, the 12 had grown into, 250 guys on Tuesday morning. And so I went to the bank and got crisp $50 bills. And at the end of the thing, we gave every guy in the program a $50 bill. And guys are jumping up going, I can get a bus ticket. I can go home for Christmas. I can buy my kids presents. I mean, they were high-fiving and so excited. And I said to them, okay, that's your money. You can do with it whatever you want to. But 3 blocks away, there's a school that caught on fire last month, and it burned up all of their stuff. And I said, so they're really struggling without notebooks and paper and pencils and things like that. I said, I was just down at Children's Healthcare last week, and they told me that over the Christmas holidays, there'll be 300 kids there on Christmas Day, and it's the coldest winter in 100 years in Atlanta, and there's people sleeping under cardboard. So whatever you guys collectively want to donate into this basket in the middle of the room, we as group leaders have pledged to match you dollar for dollar. The 15 group leaders will match you 250 guys dollar for dollar, and we'll go buy notebook paper, and we'll go buy hats and gloves, and we'll go buy toys for kids. 250 homeless addicts got up and went and put their $50 bill in the bucket. Every man in the room. And then they started digging through their pockets and pulling out $5 bills and $10 bills. And then they went back to their room and they got their change and started dumping it in there. And at that point, I got up and walked around the corner and sat against the wall and sobbed like I have not sobbed as an adult in my life, because I'm like, man, I feel good about myself when I sit there and write a check for somebody, but I never gave every dime I had to somebody else. And so being wrong about somebody, when you look at somebody out on the street and you think, oh, they're just a bum or they're just a drug addict, it's like, no, they're a person. And they've got a heart maybe bigger than yours, and that they're willing to give everything they've got to help somebody else.
Wow. Well, isn't that powerful? So we're challenging folks at all of our Atlanta area churches, all 9 churches around the city, to step out of their comfort zone, answer a call, and do something uncomfortable. And we've asked people to go to a website. You were here, and some did, and some won't, and some will, and they'll get too busy. And I love the fact that your first invitation, you had that phone number, and you set it on your dresser, and you shuffled it around and moved it around, and it sat there, and then finally. And so what would you say, because our churches are full of busy people, raising kids, grandkids, we're going to work, and our hearts are good. You were generous in our hearts. We're just not all that generous on our calendars sometimes. So, our churches are yours. What do you say to us busy people about these opportunities?
Yeah, I tell my kids that you're not really alive until you have a few hold your nose and jump moments. Just like when I quit IBM to be a comedian, that was a hold your nose and jump. First year I did 406 shows, made $8,300.
And how many shows?
406. Wow. So, and I know you're going, there's only 365 days in a year, but that's like 2 shows Friday, 3 shows, or whatever. If you wait until you have the free time to go love on somebody else, you're never going to do it. Just say yes. Just so, yes, I will commit to go do this. And what I found happened to me, I was wrong about what the world sells you as being a full life. I find with my life is the best when I'm not the most important thing in it. And everybody in here has somebody in their life, an aunt, a grandfather, a grandmother, whatever, that you look at and you go, man, that's the kind of life I want to lead. I guarantee you, whoever you're thinking about when I say that was not a self-focused person. They were another, because I've never known anybody that was self-focused, that was happy. And so when Jesus said, and I used to contemplate that, what does that mean when he said, you'll have life to the full? It's not what the world tells you. It's not, hey, what can I get for me? I found that what I found down there, to know, because when you serve somewhere like that, you're probably thinking, well, you come away with that with the idea of, oh, I'm so appreciative over what I have and they don't have. And that's not the case at all. The case for me is, oh, I know somebody's story and we have much more in common than we're different, and we're both loved the same way by this crazy God that just covers us in a waterfall full of grace. So the full is the relationship that I have with these guys that I never would have had if I hadn't just said yes. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love these guys. They've made my life so much better. I sit there, you would pay money to listen to them pray. So they're not like this, and I'm not being accusatory, but sometimes on Sunday we act like we got it all going on, And when we do, we're just pretending we don't have it all going on. So sometimes it's refreshing for a guy to go, hey, I stole my grandmother's life savings to buy crack. And you're like, well, the cross covers that too. We can deal with that. So, but if you write a check, you're going to have a positive influence on somebody's life, and that's great. But if you serve, you're not only going to have a positive influence on somebody's life, you're probably going to have a real positive influence on your own life. And it just makes it richer and fuller. And once you've tasted purpose, you can't be happy with just existing anymore.
Wow. Well, Jeff, thank you for what you do. Thanks for coming today. Can we give a warm multi-campus welcome? And thanks to Jeff Foxworthy. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. God bless you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
So if you're like me, that was pretty powerful stuff. We just heard from Jeff Foxworthy. Just, man, stories of true difference making that we can make in people's lives. We take time and say yes, as he said yes. So today, it's about a few things. We talk about it's about giving, loving, serving, giving. So in Luke chapter 12, Luke, if you remember, Luke was a doctor. Okay, so Luke was not one of the disciples. He was a doctor, and he was investigating this character, Jesus, wanted to find out, okay, what's the story? So he interviewed people, eyewitnesses to what happened. And he's interviewing all these eyewitnesses, and their stories kept collaborating. So he's like, okay, when these stories collaborate, I'm writing it down. And so all their stories collaborating, he's writing down what's happening. And he writes this part about Jesus, one moment where Jesus is talking to his closest friends, which were his followers, his disciples. And Jesus was talking to his closest friends because his friends were having a struggle. And maybe you felt this, I felt this before too. The friends, the disciples, were struggling with this idea of how much is appropriate to give away from myself. Like, how much do I keep for myself and how much do I give away to other people? Like, what's the magic formula, Jesus? Tell us, what's the right way to do this? Because, we know Jesus wants us to be happy, of course, but yet there's responsibility he has for us when we have things. So Jesus addresses this tension that he was feeling with his disciples, and he does it in verse 32 of chapter 12. And so let's check this out. Here's what he says. Do not be afraid, little flock, And so little flock is like a way of just saying, hey, we're kind of a close group. It maybe made him chuckle because he may have used it before, but it was an endearing term because, hey, it's just us, okay? Do not be afraid. So don't freak out. For your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. In other words, Father being God, he's pointing out to him, look, God's already given you everything you could possibly need or want. In other words, you're going to be okay. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Don't freak out. Like when you're trying to think how much, don't let fear be the thing to make you worry about not having enough, because our Father God is taking care of you. And Jesus was constantly proving that to him through miracles, feeding the 5,000. And he was constantly showing them, you can trust God no matter what. Don't worry about it, guys. He continues. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Now there's it goes from 0 to 100. I mean, not just, so take 5 or 10%. I mean, they're used to the tithe. I mean, they grew up in Jewish homes where they were taught a tithe is 10%. Give 10% away. Jesus says, okay, so just sell it all and give it to the poor. And they're all probably like, oh, okay. Wow. I mean, that's a big ask. I mean, what's Jesus doing? So Jesus continues. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out. And purses are another way to say like a long-term investment account or a long-term savings, an IRA, if you will, or Roth, Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. They were used to in that time hiding things of value. But you had to be careful where you put it and how you stored it, because things like bugs, insects, moths, you could go back to it later and be like, I had this cover for our boat that we bought a used pontoon boat. We've been putting money into it, fixing it up. And it came with a cover, but it had a rip in it. So I paid this person to fix the rip in it, and I put it in this nice big storage tote out in our barn to keep it, until it was time to use it, because you don't use it very often. And I went out there to get it later this summer. And I opened it up, and it's full of these huge carpenter ants. And I pull it out and stretch it out, and there's tons of little holes all throughout it. And I'm like, who would have thought carpenter ants would have went inside just enough room to get up inside the tote, and we're building a nest, basically. So they were burrowing, making little holes. They ruined it. So I can identify with the fact that he said bugs can get in things. So you were always looking for safe places to store stuff that was valuable of yours. They were used to that. So Jesus is addressing that fear of, I know it could be kind of scary, like, oh, I hope it's going to be okay. I hope my investment account continues to build. I hope it doesn't go down. Don't look at your statements lately. Just keep them, just wait a couple of years. So this is what Jesus is addressing, because he knows what we face, the worries, the concerns that we have. Because he says, in other words, he's turning their attention to eternal, not temporary, physical that we're in right now. Because we so easily think of our lives as, this is it, man. Give it all your gusto. Make your bucket list and do it now, because you don't know how much time you have. This is how we think, because we think of our temporary lives and these physical bodies as a countdown clock, and we gotta, do what we can, live life to the fullest, because we don't know how much time we have. But Jesus is saying, no, you're missing it. These 80, 90, 100, maybe the woman I heard about the other day lived to be 120. That's nothing compared to eternity. Eternity is forever. Eternity is where your real life is going to be. This is going to be thought of in the future. You're going to think of this as the introduction. This was that little commercial clip before the movie began. That's what this is. But we get so easily swayed and distracted. So Jesus is trying to almost take his hand and turn their head and say, whoa, don't look at that. Look over here for a second. This is what's important. Don't worry about now. Think about later. So he's pointing out that you can invest in something that's going to last forever. You can invest in a place that matters, that makes a difference. So the point in all this, he makes with one last statement. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And it's like a drop the mic moment, because all the disciples are like, oh yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah, good point. I see what you're saying. Because Jesus knew that, your heart is something that's contained wherever you value most. Your most important thing. That's where your time's going to go. Your money's going to go. That's where your love is going to go. And he knows that where your treasure is, your heart will be also. He's pointing out that let's not worry about that. Don't be worried about the temporary. Think about the eternal. So the point Jesus is making is be generous and give as if it mattered. Because it does. It matters what we do with what we have. So this week we're inviting everyone to participate in our Give, Serve, Love campaign. Now we have said, and we keep saying this, it's only $39.95. The price never changes, doesn't go up with inflation, doesn't, it's the same. But I also need to point this out too, that most people give more than $39.95. Because we realize that, okay, where I'm at, I can do more. And there's some people who maybe are unable to give right now and they don't give, and so it helps make up for those that don't. But every year it always works out. But most of the time we see people give more. Maybe people might say, I can do 1,000 or I can do 100 or something in between. But 100% of the money, 100% of the money donated goes to help people outside the community. So Pastor Matt's got nothing to gain here. I'm not looking to try to get a new car. I'm not hoping to, upgrade the church to a thing. No, it's nothing to do with me. I've got no gain in this. This is 100% for other people. This is for our community. And so my ask is easy because it's not selfish. And as Jeff Foxworthy was saying, it moved me so much when he talked about how he gave those homeless men money to do whatever they wanted to with, and then said, hey, let's see what happens, but do you want to give some of it back? And to give it all back, including on top of it, to go back in the rooms to get more, that convicts me. Because I think it's hard for me sometimes to give a part of what I've got, and they're willing to give it all. And I'm not trying to suggest, nor is Jesus, that we're suggesting you sell your homes and give everything to the poor. That's not, you're missing the point if that's what you're taking it too literal. The point is down here. The point is to focus on eternal. The point is to give in a way that you can make a difference, because you know you can. If we're rich, let's give as if we're rich and not as if we're poor or just barely getting by. We excuse ourselves easily by saying, well, we're kind of tight, or let's not do it that way. Let's give as if God really is the most important thing, and we look at eternity, not just in temporary. So there's 3 ways we can give. We're gonna put that up here. You can, got a cool little QR code. You can do it through PayPal if you want to, or you can do cash in or check in an envelope. If you do a check, make sure you write in the memo, give. If you do PayPal, that's also important, because in the PayPal it has a memo to add a note. It says, make sure you note on there, give. That way we make sure it goes towards Give, Serve, Love. Otherwise, if it doesn't have that, it's gonna go towards the regular giving. Important to know. And I also have to say, PayPal has a fee that they charge of 3% that they keep. I don't ever see it. So if you give a certain amount, like $100, just know that $3 of it is gonna be, it's gonna be 97 actually, that we'll put into the Give, Serve, Love, because that's what PayPal gives us after it's done. So it's just a convenience fee that they charge. It's got nothing to do with us. So, lastly, I want to say this. Dan Streeter was here last week. If you didn't get a chance to catch that, you can go online and watch that message. Incredible time, because Dan Streeter is the leader, the director of the Saginaw Rescue Mission, which is one of probably our primary support topics for our church, that we give to them because they're doing such great work with homeless and helping rehabilitate people and making changes in lives. And Dan was sharing with us last week about that, and it's just so incredible to hear all the things that are being done. But one of the things that Dan said, if you heard this or not, I want to bring it to your attention. He said that volunteers are hard to find now, because throughout the last few years, with different things happening, they've just lost a lot of their regular volunteers that they've always had and counted on. And they're having a hard time getting volunteers. And they use volunteers for all kinds of things. If you want to do light construction and maintenance around the building, cleaning, also a kitchen, if you like to cook or do things like that, or help out with cooking, they always need help in their kitchen. But they're always looking for people who can help out. And I think as a church, if we want to do that, that's one of those ways that Jeff Foxworthy was talking about when you serve and do something, you won't regret it. I promise you. You'll come back to me the next week, you'll say, Matt, let me tell you what happened. I went there just to help out, and let me tell you what happened. It's incredible what happens when we serve and help others. Of course, there's opportunities to serve in our church as well. But for this Give, Serve, Love, it's not about what we're doing in our church. We're talking about what we're doing in the communities. And so we want to be a part of that. I know Raven was telling me that next week, her and her son Calvin are going to be serving with a charity that they have been supporting for a long time. And they're going to be basically volunteering the time to help out with that. And I said, that's awesome. I love that. And so I celebrate that they're doing that together. And the last thing we talk about, of course, is love. And love is the act seen by giving and serving to others. So that's the culmination of it all. And I mentioned before, but I want to say it again, next week is our special event, Be Our Guest Sunday. I'm asking everyone to invite somebody to come with you to experience what we call church or what we call home here at Silver Creek Church, because it's important. And we've put out all kinds of invitations in the community this last week through our events. So I'd like to invite folks to be here and be a part of this, or to join us online in any case. So in just a moment, I'm going to close, and we're going to finish with a video. And this video is an important reminder of inviting people to church in different ways that we can do that together. So let's watch that video. And they were dismissed. Thank you so much.
Yo, I know you hear me. Mrs. Edwards.
What do you want?
Mrs. Edwards, I know I ask you this like every week, but would you like to ride to church with me? Oh, come on, Mrs. Edwards, you like my church. We have some hot music. It may not be what you're bumping at all, but it's hot. We get down. What do you say, Mrs. Edwards?
Oh, I suppose.
I've heard it said that 80% of first-time church visitors come because someone personally invited them. All people need to feel loved and wanted, and for some people, it just takes having someone offer to give them a ride to church. We have something great going on at this church. People's lives are being transformed by God's love. Your homework this week is to find at least one person who could use a little more of that love and invite them to come with you next week. Trust me, it's worth the extra effort.
Mrs. Edwards, you want to listen to some music on the way? Go ahead, your choice. Okay, here we are.
You made the rain, so when it falls on me, should I complain? Or feel you calling me, it's all on me to stay. And really catch what you're showing. It's my roots that you're growing, cause life is more than this moment.
You are the light.
Okay.
So when the darkness falls, the greatest heights, they never seem so tall, no, not at all, you're right. It's my roots that you're growing, don't wanna miss what you're showing.
Ain't no doubt about you, everywhere that